Exchange. My name is Theresa Davis, and I am the literary director for the Arts Exchange. I'm going to start us off by thanking our sponsors and our donors. So, the Southeast Community Cultural Arts Center, doing business as the Arts Exchange, receives support from the Fulton County from Fulton County, Atlanta, Georgia Board of Commissioners, and the Georgia Council for the Arts, under the guidance of the state of Georgia's legislatures and the support of the National Endowment for the Arts. The Community Foundation of Greater Atlanta, through the A Place to Perform grant, Fidelity Charitable, and the estate of Dr. Doris Derby, and Peach State Health Plan. Our literary programs are made possible in partnership with South Fulton Institute. Support is also provided by our individual and business donors and members. We encourage you to become a supporter. Thank you so much for joining us. And today I get to talk to Mr. Jay Ward, and I'm so excited. Hi, Jay. How are you doing this fine Sunday afternoon?
I'm doing so well, even better now.
Yay!
Yeah, really love being on here. This is great.
Thank you so much. This is something that I started doing because I know a lot of, as a poet coming up, when we weren't given all those, lovely book deals, when we were like putting our books together and schlepping them along in our backpacks.
Right.
I just wanted to give an opportunity for folks wherever they were to just talk about what they were doing and get folks to support them. And, then the world shut down. So it became more effective virtually, because then instead of just being local, I could actually reach out all over. And that's amazing, because now I have the Poet Laureate of North Carolina, who is not actually in my room, but is in the room with me. So I'm so excited. Yay. And I got your book, and the new book, Compositions, which is available now through Button Poetry, and you should get yours. It's so fascinating. Like, when I first got it, I just kind of, how you kind of flip through it. I'm like, this looks like a lot of research.
Yeah, it was that.
And research is not something that people think of when they think of poets. How long have you been working on this particular project?
So the base group of poems that was that manuscript probably came out 5 or 6 years ago. And then, so about 2 years ago, I really started thinking like how the manuscript could exist in a better way. At that time, I was new into the writing workshop, so I'd gone to Callaloo. I think I was at Breadloaf when I had the idea. Oh, you know what I should do is take these poems that explore, biracial or being multiracial, and from this Southern lens. And start incorporating form and play with form, combine form, break form, create new form. So then I went into research mode for about 6 to 8 months of restructuring every poem in form and figuring out what works and what doesn't work and throwing that away and starting over. And then in 2020, I went to a winter retreat at the Watering Hole, and Tayemba Jess was the manuscript coach. So I had the pleasure of Tayemba looking at my manuscript as well as the rest of the cohort. And based on feedback from them, I think it was clear then that I had done the research on form, but I needed to do more research on this topic to really delve into it more. So then I did another 6 to 8 months of research on documents and historical context and conversations around miscegenation and around, because really I wanted to have a conversation with the conversation that was in the air that my parents, when my parents were courting and when they got married. What was the conversation in the air? What was influencing that conversation? So that led me into, Loving versus Virginia and Senate Bill 219, which was the mother of all anti-miscegenation laws.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of research. So the short answer, I gave a really long answer, but the short answer was the poems. Some of the poems existed 5 or 6 years ago, but all of them have gone dramatic transformation since then, in terms of form and then in terms of focus on historical context.
Yeah, no, I'm when I think of composition, I think of a couple of different things, right? Like, we all had that composition notebook that we went to school with. Maybe we had 7, if we had 7 classes, and then the composition of of creating a piece of music, right? Or creating a well-balanced recipe. So there's so many nuances and so many connotations that can be, added to that. And so I wonder how much of that thought of what that word meant goes into how you structured this work.
All of it, everything you just said. So the composition notebook being where you can write notes and you study from and you create this thing. So some of the poems are annotated. Some of the poems kind of exist almost like note taking. The marbled aspect, like the black and white marble aspect of the cover of a composition notebook. Yeah, and exactly like composition of song, composition of self, composition of person or any other thing that might require a recipe or some kind of composition. And funny story, the original title of the manuscript was Mixed. And like some of the immediate feedback from like the cohort and from Tyemba was like, yeah, this doesn't do anything. You gotta give me more than that. So it was kind of thinking on one of the poems that I ended up writing from that, and then just thinking more of like what makes more of a statement about what this is about, because the manuscript isn't necessarily about being mixed. I think that was just like a low-hanging fruit, like easy answer. And then fortunately I had friends that were willing to tell me that's whack. And then, figure out what is what's a deeper connotation that I could draw from.
Yeah, no, I love when I have friends that are like, yeah, you didn't even try.
Yeah.
Go back to your room.
Yeah,
do it again. And I think that's important, to have those kind of people in your corner. Did you find, like, I know, you started this project before the pandemic. During the pandemic, was that when you had more of your own time to be able to dive into the research that you needed to do?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it was. So during the pandemic, I think I was like a lot of artists, I was frustrated that just normal life was frustrating, but also like to have this extra time, I guess, per se, and not feeling particularly creative during that period. But like digging my heels into research and digging my heels into form, into editing and revision, that was an easier transition. It, because it didn't require as much of creativity from creating something new, but directing that into work that existed and figuring out how to chisel it and how to make it better. So yeah, was that your experience during the pandemic too?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that was like, because I think we kind of not necessarily write stylistically the same, but I think some of our themes are the same just because we're just Black in America and doing our own thing, and Black in America gets messy all over the place. And so it was like, it was really, really hard for me to create new work, even though I was, it's weird. I mean, I think I do a lot of workshops, and whenever I do a workshop, I always create something. But for some reason, between 2020 and the beginning of 2022, it didn't feel like it was the normal kind of creative that I would do. It almost felt forced, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I wrote something, but I'm probably never going to go back to this thing because it's not the stuff that I usually write on. But then to spend 2 years flicking through your channels and going, oh, what, this again? How many times do I have to write that poem? I've already written that poem. You know what I mean? It was really frustrating for me because I just felt like we were banging our heads against a door and saying the same things over and over and over again, and nobody was listening. Yeah. And then now nobody's really listening because I am like literally in my house. So yeah, so I think that a lot of artists figured out how to use that creativity in some way. I think for me, I didn't write as much as I started doing other kinds of crafts, other kind of art, visual art. I got back into my miniatures. Everything seemed so big. So for me to make things that were really, really small helped me focus and stay centered, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Sure.
So, but a lot of people like dived in and like got super creative, and their writing was able to come out. A lot of those people who were able to do that don't consider themselves artists. I have 3 friends that basically wrote novels, And that they were like, I didn't know I could do that. I'm like, because you didn't have time, because you've been working from sun up to sundown. You never had time to sit with yourself, you know?
Yeah.
So you had any friends that have come across that you were like, oh, you didn't know you were creative?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've definitely seen people, write novels. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that was in your wheelhouse, and they probably didn't even, know either. But that's really
Yeah.
inspiring for me. Like when people step out of that comfort zone or that frame or that box that other people see them in, and they create something just completely new. That always inspires me. I always feel
Yeah.
like that maybe that could be me one day. I'll have to try that.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that. I think that if nothing else, we've learned that we have to create new ways to create, and I guess new ways to kind of not necessarily reinvent ourselves, but maybe refocus ourselves when things get weird in other areas. And I think that a lot of people who are creatives do that anyway. But I think that we have just kind of like we had to focus. So we didn't focus on it as much because it was like our normal day to day. This is what we do. I change lanes when I need to, but then it was like, oh wait, the lanes have changed for everybody. And now go. So talking about creativity, as far as poetry, I know a lot of people find poetry intimidating, or difficult to approach. What tools do you use to encourage people to engage and appreciate poetry, to engage with and appreciate poetry? Like, how do you get them into that space of like, maybe it's okay?
Yeah. It depends on who I'm talking to and who I'm working with. I think, like anybody that says that they don't like poetry or they don't appreciate poetry in the day to day, like I feel like that's always just a blinder that they have up. Like that's their old high school English teacher talking when they were forced to read the Iliad or Beowulf or something crazy. Not that
Yeah.
those aren't legitimate pieces of art. They are. It's really hard to enter them, especially from high school. Especially when all you're taught in high school are like literally a dead language of poetry as opposed to contemporary voices, which is a much easier in route. But yeah, I mean, I remind like if you listen to the radio, then you like poetry, and objectively you can argue whether it's good or bad, but it's poetry.
Yeah.
Everything. Yeah, I think even watching a movie, anything artistic, anything you do that you're good at, that you're passionate about, the way that if you're an accountant, the way you work with numbers and you solve this issue for this client, like there's an art in that, there's a poetry in that. It exists everywhere. Now, if I'm talking to younger kids, then I think my in route is always like colors and shapes, which are like the building blocks for metaphor when I work with like younger kids. So I don't know if I'm answering the question, but like when I'm talking to different people, it just depends on like what their view of poetry is and what needs to be there en route to understanding it and to knowing how powerful it is, in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah. So as part of your tenure as Poet Laureate, are you going into a lot of schools or communities? What kind of work are you creating to engage your community?
So I've gone to a lot of schools.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah,
you're right.
I've been to a lot of schools recently, just doing residencies and that kind of thing. But I also worked with the program director over at the Mecklenburg Detention Center. So it's it's a jail. We don't have a prison in Charlotte, but we do have a jail, which they call a detention center. And we created a creative writing program for the residents there. And we also created a music program for the residents there, which I think is pretty exciting. We're working with a local producer who's going to actually build out a studio there and have song making classes. And then there's a creative writing program that's going to be twice a week that actually starts this coming Tuesday, and it'll be twice a week for the rest of the year. So all that, I think that is pretty exciting. I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about. But we also created through the Arts and Science Council a monthly laureate workshop series through the library here in University City. So I've kind of selected some local poets that will be leading poetry workshops once a month. And then after the poetry workshop is a 2-hour office hours where anybody in the community that wants to come and talk to the Poet Laureate about about writing or publishing or performing or just reviewing some poems, we have a chance to kind of work with the community in that way. And when we kicked the series off in January with Jackie Shelton Green, who's the Poet Laureate for the state of North Carolina, and that went really well, I think. So yeah, that and other ways, I'm pretty excited to just engage the community. Oh, so I also got together with West Trade Review, Charlotte Lit, and Goodyear Arts, who are local arts organizations here in Charlotte, and we created a year-long fellowship. And that was just a result of a conversation. We didn't have any funding or grants or anything. We just started talking about how can we improve the literary landscape, how can we make it better for all poets, but also how can we, improve one poet at a time, and then let that poet impact the community as well. So we announced in January the 2023 Good Lit Fellowship, and the winner this year was Isaac Akanmu. And already met with Isaac. Isaac is like on the ground running, access to Charlotte Lit's catalog of classes. Is going to be facilitating a few workshops this year. We'll have a reading. We'll have a 1 month residency at Goodyear Arts. Just a lot of good things in the work to kind of do that. And then I'll tell you one thing that we haven't announced, but it's official as of yesterday. There were so many good applications, and we were able to find some applicants that we could invite to become readers at West Trade Review. And there's a few applicants that I think now are going to be part of a cohort. So though they didn't get the year-long fellowship, they are going to be part of a cohort with a few other writers and applicants from some other fellowships, where they can kind of learn and grow together with some slight guidance from myself and a few other folks. So
like a little mini incubator.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I feel really good about some of the impact that's happening from that.
No, I mean, I can hear the excitement in your voice. You're like, and guess what?
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's exciting to be able to do things for your community and to feel that love back. And I think that, so many of my friends have gone through the process of having that position in their state. And some have successfully obtained it, and some, have, finalists or whatever. But all that energy to want to create dialogue and to want to create spaces for people to have that dialogue. I feel like, the way things are coming, that dialogue is what's going to bring us back to our humanity. I really believe that, and it shows us where our shared humanity is. So that's beautiful. I'm so excited. Yay. So the fellowship is a year long. What comes with that fellowship, other than the opportunity to work with your awesomeness?
Thank you. It's all right. So with the collaborators, so West Trade Review is a local trade journal that operates out of Johnston and Wales University. So the fellow is going to get feedback on a set of poems. They're going to get like an intro to publishing 101 with the editor of the journal, and then also be able to read for the remainder of the year, which there's so much growth that comes as just being a reader for a poetry journal. And then from Charlotte Lit is an organization here in Charlotte that operates in a way to, I guess, better the community by offering poetry workshops and writing workshops, fiction workshops, and also access to other things literary. But they'll get access to the entire catalog of classes. They'll get a year-long membership with that organization, an opportunity to facilitate a workshop for them, and then some one-offs here and there. But they're also going to have a chapbook published at the end of the year by Charlotte Lit. And then with Goodyear Arts, they'll get a 1 month residency, free use of space 24 hours there. They'll get a reading. They'll also get feedback on poems from the poetry crew that's on staff there.
Yeah.
For myself, they'll get access to a 6-week workshop that I'm doing through Button. They'll get feedback on their entire chapbook manuscript. So I'm going to kind of help them edit it and revise it and get it ready for that publication. And then kind of one-on-one mentoring for like how to facilitate the workshop and how to do other things to kind of engage in the community. I think there's a few things I'm leaving out, but that's the broad stroke.
Yeah, no, that sounds lovely. Sounds lovely. So when you were, in your high school years and you were sitting at your desk wondering what you were going to do with the rest of your life, Was it poetry?
No. In high school, I was really convinced I was going to be a rap star when I was in high school. I think I was fully convinced of that because at some point, like really young, I started 5th or 6th grade. I was writing poetry, but once I got into middle school, from like middle school through high school and through first year of college, all my poetry was in the form of rap. And
What was your rap name? What was your rap name? You know you had one.
Oh man! All right, all right. So before I tell you, because this is like a big joke among like Slam Charlotte and my team. Sorry, before I tell you, I have to tell you that this was the 90s, right? So 90s. All right. So my name was Yellowstone, and I was in a duo, and the duo was the Stones, and he was Blackstone, and I was Yellowstone, but it was an acronym. I think maybe I won't tell you the whole acronym. I'll tell you what the Stones acronym was: Sophisticated Teacher of Nubian Education. That's what Stones stood for. And then, I don't know if I want to share what yellow stood for on this medium, but if anybody is watching or listening and follows up with the question, then
You'll answer it.
I'll answer it.
Okay. No, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I know you had one, and you probably had several. Like this is for this stage, and this is for this stage.
Yeah.
I think that because I've talked to I work with a lot of middle school and high school students, and a lot of the middle schoolers one of the ways that I get them into the vibe of the poetry workshop is to remind them that rap is lyrical poetry. And this, we get into rhythm, we get into A B A B B A, we get into all that stuff, and then but they all have a rap name. But I had the most interesting conversation with this 4th grader who believes he is going to be a rap star. And I said, "What is your name?" And he says, "I'm going to be Lil something." And I was like, "Okay." He says, "But I realize I'm not going to be Lil for long." And I'm like, "Okay, so what does that mean?" He's like, "So I got 3 names. So like Lil is when I get famous while I'm Lil. And then when I'm bigger, I'm going to be bigger. And then when I'm an adult and I'm still famous, I'm going to come out with my real name." I was like, "Oh, you have a plan?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "It's always been weird to me to look at people who are like in their 50s, and the rappers he's talking about are not in their 50s, right, and their first name is Lil. That don't make no sense."
Right.
It was 4th graders are some insightful little brothers. Yeah. Let me tell you.
So Lil Wayne, Bigger Wayne, Sean Johnson.
Yay.
Right. Yeah.
That should have been the plan.
Yeah.
You grow with the name. But no, I have some of the most interesting conversations with young people. And I don't know about you, but for me, it's like working with young people has always made it possible for me to work with adults. It's like they take the edginess off, and then I can go work with the adults, and they put the edginess back on, and then I go work with the kids. And yeah, it's like a vicious cycle, but nicer maybe. All right, I have another question for you. Do you use music? So with that music background that you have, where you wanted to be a rapper, is any of that incorporated into your work as a poet now?
I think definitely for performance, like definitely for spoken word poetry. I think to a lesser degree in my published work, but definitely when I'm writing a poem for performance, I think my theory is I want to be multiple instruments. My approach to writing a poem for performance is probably the way a lot of people would approach a group piece, because I'm trying to incorporate many voices and many sounds. So sonically, I want it to be an orchestra. Sonically, I want it to be many instruments coming in at the right time and layered. And then from a voice standpoint, I want to bring in other voices than my own into a work. So like if I'm talking about gentrification, I want to bring in the voices of the displaced. If I'm talking about oppression, I want to bring in those voices that don't have their own stage. I probably should think about how to do that on my page work. But yeah, for sure, I bring in musical references, cadences, those musical notes definitely are present in all my performance work.
Yeah, and having been spanked by your performance work, I applaud and appreciate it. It's like I'm always excited about, you know, when I go into, it's like when slam was a big part of my life. When I would get into rooms where I was like, oh, I'm gonna get spanked by Jay Ward and blues. It's gonna be awesome. I had songs.
So I don't. I mean, I have to doubt whether that's happening, because most of the time, most of the time that we've slammed against each other has been at Leaf, and my dialogue is like, okay, I'm about to get spanked by Theresa Davis, which is normally what happened.
Leaf was a whole different thing. I miss Leaf. Have you been back there?
I haven't been in a few years. Probably been 3 or 4 years.
I know they're doing it this year, and they've asked me to consider coming. And I think I'm just now getting to the place to where, you know, when you're away from the large crowd thing, and then you realize how gross human beings actually can be. I mean, can you imagine? We used to let toddlers spit on cake and then we would eat it. I'm like, we did that. So it's taken me a minute to get back into the larger spaces of performing. You know, and people I trust invite me to stuff, and so I've been in Charlotte and I've been in some of those crowd spaces, right? But I feel like that group, those audiences are going to be a little more amenable to you not wanting to be touched or hugged or whatever, you know. But yeah, Leaf is not that way. You know, they just run up and hug. And I'm like, okay, we had a whole pandemic. I had a woman who I hadn't seen in a couple of years because, you know, the world. And the first thing she did was run up on me, hug me, and kiss me on the face. And I'm like, we don't do that anymore.
Right.
Like,
that's so 2019.
I know. I like, who does that? It was, anyway. So that's my fear of Leaf. It's like just being bum rushed, and not having enough Lysol for everybody. But would never spray people with Lysol. But but no, I mean, I think that I'm excited to try to get back to that space. I've been accepting more and more, you know, events where I'm in larger crowds. I just finished doing a stage production, and I haven't done one of those in years, called High Risk Baby, reproductive right and other reproductive recipes. And it was very, very fun. So it was exciting to kind of like be on a stage again, and, you know, oh, I still know how to do this thing. Yeah. So I think I'm ready. So I think, you know, Nave is having a big old slam in May. So I'm considering it, the Leaf Slam. I'm considering it. And I would love to have, you know, my friends come and us beat each other up over poetry. It'll be lovely on a mountain with a bunch of hippies around. It'd be great. I have a question. What advice do you give aspiring poets who are just starting out?
To consume a lot of poetry, whether that means reading a lot, or whether that means watching YouTube videos, or whether that means going to open mics. Like in whatever way you consume it, just consume a lot of it. See what's out there, what strikes you. I think a lot of young writers are worried that by doing that, they'll be influenced, and, you know, their poetry will sound like everybody else. And they're half right. They will definitely be influenced. But I think it's critical as you're on the road to developing your own voice. It's critical to hear other voices and to see how people convey thought. And by osmosis, I suppose, like a lot of things rub off. One of my biggest influence when I moved to Charlotte, because I didn't start performing until I moved to Charlotte, and one of my biggest influences was C.P. Mays, but you wouldn't be able to tell it in my work. Like C.P. Mays does completely different things than I do in a very brilliant way. And that's why I was more attracted to that work. I was like, wow, could I ever do this? How is this even possible, what he's doing? And so I would just become immersed in that. So yeah, just consume more and more of it, however you can. And then after that, like, write as much as possible. Write the stuff that sucks. Like, just let it come out. Go ahead It's like priming an engine. You have to get the bad stuff out at some point. So don't be afraid of writing bad poems or bad metaphors or whatever. Just write them. Just get them out, and you can always go back and edit, revise later, or burn it if that's if that's what you choose to do. But yeah, really consume as much as possible and produce as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, generationally, and this is probably going to sound weird to our listeners, and the listeners, if you have questions for Mr. Jay Ward, just put them in the chat and I will ask them. But like, I as growing up, I never took being influenced by somebody as wanting to be like them. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's like that word has changed meanings.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I grew up, like, as a child, I grew up with a lot of very famous poets now, who they weren't then. That's then. They were just my mom's friends in the backyard, forcing me to go get them things. But you know, when I come on the other end of that, and you know, all of them influenced me, but I never tried to sound like Tony Cade, or I never tried to sound like Leroy Brown. I was influenced by their work because it was always around me. But I took that influence as like, work harder, write better, you know, not sound like.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
I think it makes sense.
It does.
Yeah. So your book composition, I know it just released this month, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Officially.
Yep.
So would you care to share some of it with us?
Sure.
And our dear readers? It's so pretty, y'all. So you should totally go get it.
Yes, please do.
And do you have workshops coming up with Button Poetry for this collection as well?
I do have workshops coming up in July and August. There's two different groups of 6-week workshops with Button coming up.
Okay. I will try to find it and put it in the chat. But right now, y'all, we are going to hear from the fabulous Jay Ward. Yay! All right.
Thank you so much. Like prophets of Baal, we had gotten a whole hog from Orlander, pink-fleshed and splayed like a sacrifice to cover sin, which is belief that tomorrow is a place we can eat. I walk around the offering before the body is pulled. The men maneuver flame, and smoke seems to follow me no matter where I go. Dad is gone to tend the fire. My uncle motions the bag toward me, peels it from the bottle's mouth like a fast-moving rain cloud. It burns sweet on my finger. I look around nervous. That's good stuff, my uncle says, and I nod in belief, face contorting into an amen. But it burns like the split open swine on cinder blocks. See how the smoke follows our gods like eyes of a portrait, an heirloom. The men walk in their own ritual of pretense, ignoring whole conflagrations. My uncle ignores whole burns in his chest, just like Dad. One day, I'd beg Uncle Skin to put the cigarettes down. He'd say there's no point in quitting now, when he could feel what was chasing him already had hold. Temple of blackened breathing, charred flesh. His lung is smoking in the pit. It's right there, leapt from his torso. We hop out his truck, and the brown paper cloud disappears under his seat, crackling its own thunder. He shows me how to coerce embers back into flame while he lights a Newport. Done. The tradition handed down. Decades pass, and I still drink cognac, my throat an altar of wet ground. Each sip proof, each taste a howl for resurrection. Bring it back, that moon, bring it back, his smile, an introduction, a soft mischief. I don't even think Dad would have minded the Hennessy really, but I never told him. Most beliefs we build on secrets. When I say cancer runs in my family, what I mean is my father and his 5 siblings couldn't run fast enough. What I mean is I ain't been back to my hometown since this uncle's funeral. What I mean is Dad is gone. My uncle followed like smoke. I'm being chased A monster's hot breath searches for my lungs. I get down face to gnarled face with the animal whose skin pops. I can smell the pork ripen like impending rain on summer air. I summon the fire now. Swallow it. Like men and gods before me, I stretch a rod through billowing smoke to touch, to test, to measure a prophecy against an unforgiving sky. This next poem is, all right, so I'm from a really, really small town in North Carolina. I was raised in a really small town, population less than 1,000, and the name of the town is Rich Square. So like opposite circle, opposite poor, Rich Square, North Carolina. But I shout it out as often as I can, as you can tell. So this poem is kind of this isn't a shout out poem to Rich Square, but the title is Homecoming, Rich Square, North Carolina. 1. Northern Black folk drive through my hometown and stop along the road to pick cotton, a drifted piece, something the machine skipped over. Feel the need to connect. Honor ancestors by picking straight from the claw of the plant's mouth, seed and all. How thorny it feels. How it calls out blood like the Big Dipper sang a whole bloodline toward a lesser wound. How can anyone do this all day? I worked that field as a kid, only once. Burlap skin like thirsty hands during an annual event, reminder for families in need of extra income. Come, the cotton gin called. Mighty fine job, St. Jackson Street, from its own crescent mouth. How callous these hands, and strong this back, I dreamed. Tan this skin, eager this frame. A man, a bag of white gold, taller than my dusty afro, earned $8.58, a check that arrived 2 weeks later. Hell no, I never went back. 2. My mother-in-law had never seen a cotton field up close. This visit, she threw open the door before I even got to a good stop, went elbow deep and picked one tuft, clean and good. Nervous, the landowner might see her working his soil and pick up a shotgun. Noticed the blood on her fingers, rubbed them pink, and was quiet the rest of the way home. I don't know if anyone else has had that experience, but so where I grew up, there was cotton fields and cornfields and pig farms, like, across the street, right everywhere you turn, there was farmland and agriculture. And of course, like, Black folks in this country have a very complicated relationship with agriculture in the South. And so I lived in like the DC area for a while. So when I would bring people back, like, friends and stuff would come down to see where I grew up. Once you get off 95, there's fields, everywhere. Once you get off 95 and you drive about another 20 or 30 minutes to get to my house. And what would always happen is the first 10, 15 minutes, it would be like, they'd just be kind of looking. But that last 10 minutes of the ride, something happened. So on the way home, it would always be like, before we get back, to the highway, can we pull over? Can we pull over? I want to, I want to pick this cotton off the side of the road. I don't know if anybody's had that experience, but it's interesting to watch. I mean, I grew up here, so it wasn't, it doesn't have that kind of effect on me, but it's always this like semi-spiritual thing, like when Northerners come through and they actually sit with it. Like this is real. Like this is actually something that's here and still here. Interestingly, which is a complete side note, has nothing to do with the poem, but so in my hometown, in the county, I grew up in Northampton County, and in that county, there is a piece of farmland, cotton field, that's been passed down for about, I think this is the 3rd generation, where it's owned by a Black family, and it's a cotton field. So the cotton gin owned by a Black family for 3 generations, which I don't have a comment on that necessarily, but I think it's really interesting. I was looking at their website and kind of the merch that they sell, and I was like, man, it's just a very interesting, nuanced thing. But I'm all in favor of the reclamation of agriculture and like the reclamation of that relationship in the South. All right, more on that later, possibly in different forms of dialogue. Let's see. How much time do we have left? I'll do this poem and then we'll check in and see what time it is. So this is a poem. I do a lot of erasures in the book, and I work a lot with black space and white space. This poem was kind of my frustration and my way of venting during the NFL boycott. So during the NFL boycott, I'm a Cowboys fan. Let's get that out the way. Okay, I know, got it. All right, I can hear the virtual boos. Okay, cool. But like during the boycott, especially, it was hard to be a Cowboys fan, just because Jerry Jones, the owner, like had some very definitive things to say to his players about what they could and couldn't do, and what the threats would be if they tried. And most of that wasn't public. So working with erasure, this is an erasure, but the source text is imagined, meaning I don't have on record everything that Jerry Jones said privately to his players, but I imagined what it was and then made an erasure based on my imagined conversation of him to his players. Jerry Jones addresses his players regarding the NFL boycott. Partially redacted, may differ slightly from actual quote. Listen, ain't no slave if you get paid, and a field ain't antebellum if you on one instead of in one. Don't confuse what we gave you for something you earned. Wait, a cotton picking minute ain't training camp hours, just like good old pigskin ain't chitlins. You conflating patriots with runaways, not my boys. Holdouts might get cut. Where is your hand? On your heart or wallet? Or over your mouth? Yes, over your mouth. Your speech is free, but muffled deep in the heart of Texas. We play for the lights and for the song. Dance, dance. I said dance. I said, you know how many folk would kill to be you in this house, my house? I said, I love all God's boys, but under these stars, we just praise America's team. You best show up, shut up, and that's just how it is between owners and you people. Entertainers should know better. Imagining your knee could change America's channel. So what I like to say during that poem is, if I can give you a chance to boo at the beginning about being a Cowboys fan, then we can kind of mutually root against Jerry Jones in this, at least in this capacity. Okay, I think I'm just gonna read one more poem. So I'm gonna shout out my hometown again. Rich Square, opposite of poor, opposite of circle. All right, here's what I think is the greatest opening line to a hip hop song ever. That's a lot to say, but this it's my favorite anyway. I grew up on the crime side, the New York Times side. Staying alive was no jive. All right, so Raekwon the Chef, opening up a Wu-Tang song and painting that picture immediately. I grew up on the crime side, the New York Times side. Now I grew up in a super small town, right? So I did not grow up on the crime side or the New York Times side, but for 3 or 4 minutes during that song, you could not tell me I wasn't from one of the boroughs. You couldn't tell me I wasn't from Brooklyn or from Long Island or somewhere, right? Because it painted a world so vivid and right off the gate, right off from the front line, which is all a setup to the first line in this poem. I loved the hometown I had to leave. I grew up on the crime side. No, it's not. I grew up in the chemtrails of segregation. My white mom went to the black church not far from the white church. My white friends took a different bus, played at the same school, but never the same house, grew up under the same flag. I played in the woods or on Creasy Lane with the two Maurices, pig farm across the street, cotton field down the road, corn next door, humid, hot, and hazy. Gravel driveways announcing visitors like a crunchy doorbell, one stoplight, pickup trucks and white friends, both seen at times with Confederate flags, water hoses doubling as water parks, Cadillacs and tractors, dirt roads and streetlights. Juxtaposition is common, like South moving north, like New York cousins boomeranging back to this ground, Home is a return to dust, root. Of course, I remember Black kids being told the pool in Jackson was closed, while dozens of kids could be seen splashing over a shoulder. Of course, I remember being followed in the store for a zebra cake called Boy, him tapping his waist. But what brings me home is what's inevitably mine. Riding round Chapel Hill Road like I own this, the bridge, the graveyard my father is buried in, home of the Rams like I own this, return of the bubble goose, cornbread and corner store swag like I own this, Mad Dog like I own this, Southern Comfort, Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill after the football game, Spirit Week bonfire with kids who make temporary friends with buying age bums, symbiosis of sorts, styrofoam cups, 8-ball, an old English accent sloshing to asphalt for the homies like I own this, recurring orbit like they know my name still. So I think I'll stop there unless you want me to go for longer, Theresa.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. Yay! No, I love that idea of because I too have sung the beginning lines of a song and been like, yep, this is where I live now for these 3 to 6 minutes, you know. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I think that, you know, revisiting place is very important, and I think it's starting to show up in a lot of my work. And I don't know if it's just because I've been able to sit where I am for a minute and think about it. But something that you said about this country and our relationship or our history and the relationship with agriculture kind of sparked something in the back of my brain as well. Because, you know, I remember taking a field trip with when I was a classroom teacher and taking a group of kids on a field trip and them looking out the window and going, "What is that?" And I was like, "Well, that's cotton." And they were like, "Wait, what?" You know,
Right.
and I pulled over because in their heads, yes, they know about slavery, they know about cotton fields, but reading about it and seeing it, it's like, I don't know what they thought cotton fields were, but the idea that it was a plant kind of blew a couple of their minds, right? And so we got out the van and you know, they were asking if they could pick some of the flowers. That's what they and the force phrasing it of flowers because they didn't know what to call it. They didn't want to say, "Hey, can I pick some cotton, Miss Theresa?" They were like, "Can we pick the flowers?" You know, and I, you know, I explained, yeah, but you know, it's thorny. You don't want to cut your hands, so be very, very careful. And actually had the knowledge to show them how to pick it, not to hurt their hands. And then nobody taught me that, but then also having that trigger of what the hell am I doing right now?
Yeah.
But I felt like that was something that a teachable moment where they were like, this is an actual plant. And actually seeing them look at how big and how wide the sea of these flowers were, and like imagining themselves doing that all day. And like, yeah, that was a mind-blowing trip. Like, we went and had fun, but when we drove back by and on the way home, they just got real quiet, you know. And I mean, I will never forget that. It was just very, very somber, but very, very real. Having like the reality versus this thing that you've read about, you know, crash together and like take on this whole other meaning in your brain, right? That was amazing. Thank you so much. I can't wait to, like, I got stuck on so I love concrete poetry.
Oh.
It's one of those things where I try to teach my students and they're like, I don't want to make it look like a flower. I want to make it look like a tulip. I'm like, but can you draw a tulip? No, you can draw a flower. Do a flower. You know, the simple flower, not the very complicated one. So the series that you have in here, I want to ask about this. Black Rapture.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I look at the shape of the is it a hawk? Is it a blackbird? It's a blackbird. But is the blackbird like soaring, or does it I don't know, it changes. What was your choice on that?
So I wanted so All right, so this was after this conversation with Tayemba where like everything formed. Tayemba was saying, if you're gonna do it, then push it. Like if you're gonna do erasures, don't do erasures like everybody else does them. Like find a new way to do it. If you're gonna work with documents, find a new way to do it. And not that Black Rapture is new, but it was new for me in that it is concrete, but also if you flip the pages, the bird is flying. So the text creates the blackbird, but the wings are in slightly
like the
different
little books we used to make when we were in high school.
Yeah. So and that's if you flip it one way. But if you turn and flip the book the other way, on the back there's a little silhouette on the back page of the text. So that bird also flies as you flip it. So either direction you flip it in, you'll be able to see one of the birds flying.
That's amazing. I just did it. Do it, y'all. So I think when I look at this beautiful book, I think that you have created this other way of people are going to have to figure out how to make their books way more interesting.
I hope so.
You know, yeah. Now I love the way I've always been fascinated with line breaks and why people choose to break a line the way they do. So I've been reading. I've been reading your book, and I've been reading Angelique Palmer's book. And so I have to take turns for each of them because y'all both deeply deep in different ways. And it's like, okay, I don't want to get punched in the face here and then turn around and get punched in the face one more time. So I've been going back and forth, but it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And I hope everybody goes out and get it. I mean, it's Black History Month. You can buy and support Black artists. And then next month it's going to be National Women's Month and then National Poetry Month. So you should buy all the books.
Absolutely.
This is our season.
Yeah. I was going to say that's a great company for the book.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can get all of your needs met there. Please do that. I want to ask you, who are some of your major influences growing up as far as what are your literary role models? Who were your literary role models coming up and still?
Yeah. So in 5th grade, we started learning about Harlem Renaissance, which at that time really just meant Langston Hughes. Like that's kind of all I learned about the Harlem Renaissance in elementary school. But like that was enough for me. And like there was this mention, so we read we read Langston Hughes, but then there was this mention that Langston Hughes incorporated jazz cadences and like the influence of jazz on the rhythm of his work. And I didn't know what that meant, but it fascinated me. I was like, what? How does that work? How do you do that? And hip hop was, not to age myself, but like, hip hop was still relatively young at the time. And I immediately started thinking like, man, hip hop is to my generation what jazz was to that generation then. And like, how does that work? How does that incorporate into poetry, into cadence, into rhythm, and that kind of thing? So early influence for sure, Langston Hughes. And I think as I got older, well, I mean, again, a lot of my influences, I put poetry away for a while. And when I came back to it, it was in the spoken word realm. So, blues and C.P. Mays and you and just like a host of really brilliant poets, like maybe the whole Snow team, like the whole, right. Oh, wow. So I'm seeing, Tank and, I'm seeing faces and drawing a blank. Icon, yes. Icon, Frequency, Akeem, a lot, like that whole crew. There's like infinite number of spoken word poets and slam poets who have influenced me. And then on the literary side, Patricia Smith actually just toggling both of those realms and being a master in both is crazy. And Kevin Young and Yusuf Kumunyaka, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we have some of the same influences as far as that goes. I mean, I will never forget being at Southern Fried and watching Team Snow do Snake and Bees and thinking, well, they just won that shit. And then also, where are my feet?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just like amazing. And I think part of my fascination with slam, because it took them a minute to get me to actually slam. I was like, what is this madness you speak of? But like going to my first slam, not slamming, but just to watch and see what it was. It was one of those things to where it was like people were doing so many things with word, and I've always been like the word nerd kid. I got in more trouble just because I knew how to use words than anybody in my school. Like a teacher put on my report card that I talked too much in class, and I told her you spelled verbose wrong, and I got detention. Okay. Another teacher asked what a kid wanted to do when he grew up. He said live forever, and she said you can't live forever, and made the class laugh at her. And I said sure you can live forever. All you got to do is write a really good book, paint a really nice picture, or write a really good song. As we're reading Walt Whitman, and I got sent to the principal's office. So like I was always that kid. So I love words. So being able to see all these people like do with words and win over audiences that like have no idea what they walked into. It was just beautiful to me. And I was like, okay, now you've convinced me. And now I want to do this. Right. So yes, a lot of the same influences as far as seeing people do amazing things and not necessarily wanting to do what they did, but wanting to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the difference. But you know what I mean, being influenced by it to where like, oh, I want to rise to a level, as opposed to I want to be you.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I know you have you're the Poet Laureate of North Carolina, but what are you doing on your own projects? What new of your own projects you have coming up? Are you just gonna rest with your baby right here for a little while you take over the Poet Laureate's world?
Yeah. So the Poet Laureate of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I only make that clear because Jackie Shelton Green, who was the first,
oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
first Black woman to be Poet Laureate of North Carolina. So I want to make sure she gets that due.
North Carolina, yes.
So like my main focus as I took the role last April of being Poet Laureate was to make sure to provide platform for other people, because I figured like being Poet Laureate, opportunities will come my way. So I don't seek any opportunities for myself. Opportunities do come, but they come to me. I don't actively look for opportunities for myself. So it's been all about like trying to create platform for other people and trying to create ways that the community here can grow, so that there's something lasting. Like once I'm not Poet Laureate anymore, there's something lasting here. And also like being the first Poet Laureate for this city means that there's going to be another Poet Laureate next year, and then 2 years after that, and then 2 years after that. So it'd be good to leave some kind of framework for them, so that it'd be a little bit easier for them. So in terms of like my own work, I have ideas, but I probably won't do much with them until April or May of 24. I'm writing a lot, but most of my writing is commissioned work. So it's work for, organizations or for the city, or, some kind of commission work that I probably won't be able to use, in publishing or in performance of my own.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I have a lot of plans for April, May 2024 of work that I want to do for myself.
Excellent. No. Thank you so much. It's been so great talking with you this afternoon. I appreciate you so much. Before we part, are there any parting words of wisdom you would like to give to our listening audience?
I don't know what people need to hear like in this moment, but I will say that I do find myself in spaces often where people let imposter syndrome get the best of them. I heard this phrase once called selecting yourself out, which means an opportunity comes and you rationalize your way out of not submitting to it. like it seems like it's something perfect for you. It's what you want. But then you start rationalizing, well, there's other people who need it too, or there's other people who are better than me, or I don't know, I probably am not as good as other folks that are submitting. And so we select ourselves out of opportunities before we even give ourselves a chance to know whether we can do it. Or we make it into these spaces and we feel so overwhelmed to be in the space. and we feel so unworthy of being in the space that we kind of close in and shut ourselves down and don't really fully take advantage of an opportunity. So in case that applies to anybody listening, my advice is you're there because you're supposed to be there. And if there's something you want to apply for it. Don't select yourself out. Don't talk yourself out of it. You might not get it, but you might. And you might learn something along the way just in the process of submitting for it and not getting it. There might be a lesson there that you learn along the way. So yeah, don't select yourself out. Believe in yourself enough to at least take the chance to go out on the limb, and don't focus so much on the end product might not be you winning the thing or taking the thing or receiving the thing. The end product might be the lesson that you learn along the way. So don't select yourself out, select yourself in, move forward, and believe in yourself.
Awesome. So we have one question that came in. One flowers is, you're an amazing talk. Thank you so much, Jay. You're a star. And then we have a question. What's another hip hop artist / song to hit deep for you?
Man, okay. So right now it is, and this is as of very recently. I started doing a deep dive into "Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst" by Kendrick Lamar, and that deep dive led me to a real appreciation for what's happening in the song. I don't know. I think most people have a kind of love relationship with Kendrick's artistic ability, but I think there's some gaps in like Kendrick's ideologies about a couple things. But I also think that we're seeing his growth in real time. So I don't know. I allow a little bit of grace for some of those gaps. But anyway, that's the song right now that I immediately think of, because I think what happens with the song, like the artistic choices of how the song is constructed, I think is really dope.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jay. I hope you have enjoyed this. I've enjoyed our time talking together. Thank you so much. I feel like I know you so much better. Now I love you so much more. It's crazy and it's weird. And the next time I see you, I'm going to ask for a hug. And if you give me consent, I'm going to hug you. It's going to be awesome. And I want to thank everybody out there for listening, and I hope you will join us again. We are here. I do this every fourth Sunday of the month. Next month, I believe I am interviewing the editors of a Dolly Parton anthology, which I think is going to be very exciting. I, too, am a fan of Dolly Parton. I remember first time hearing that song, Jolene, and actually seeing Dolly Parton. I was like, I need to see Jolene. Like, what's up? And that was the poem that I was going to submit, but it didn't seem appropriate. So I guess I did what you said to do. I selected myself out by not sending it. I was like, this is not appropriate. But I'm not going to do that anymore. Thanks to your wise words. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I want you all to enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And if you get a chance, please check out Button Poetry and pick yourself up a copy of Composition, as well as signing up for some of the amazing workshops series that they have coming up. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jay Ward. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and I will see you soon in person. Bye, everybody.